Hello there. This will be a continuation on the series we started last week on the 12 myths of breastfeeding. Welcome to your Health Today with Dr. Yide, where I talk about your health and wellness. I am Dr. Yide Jinodi. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel, I think you're missing out. Why don't you do that right now? Then hit that notification bell so you get notifications every time I post new videos. Now straight to the chase. Myth number 13. You won't make enough breast milk in the first few days after delivery. Now there's a particular reason for this. The mother is either inexperienced or emotional about this. The first 3 days breast milk is known as colostrum or liquid gold. It is not the regular breast milk and certainly not the same quantity as regular breast milk. So do not neglect the first 3 days breast milk saying that the quantity is very little. Why breastfeed the child with this? Allow it to waste. It should also be noted that some women produce more milk than others. They are usually termed wet mothers. So do not compare breast milk production between two different women. It's by virtue of their nature. So it's not a law cast in stone that a woman must produce little milk in the first 3 days. It's not for everybody. So people start to produce a lot of milk from day one. Myth number 14. Breastfeeding makes it very difficult for dads and other members of the family to bond with a newborn. Well, this is not true. We advise that family members bond with the newborn by carrying the baby skin to skin, meaning baby is naked and probably you're bare chested. Carry the child skin to skin to foster bonding. So every member of the family, nuclear family, can do that to foster bonding. Breastfeeding will not hinder the father from bonding with his baby. Myth number 15. Breastfeeding in public is rude. Now this is very false. Regardless of where you are, you can breastfeed on demand. If you're in a public place, you can breastfeed. Just ensure that you have a blanket that covers you properly. There are breastfeeding blankets that makes it very convenient for mothers to breastfeed. Ensure that you are dressed appropriately for breastfeeding if the need arises when you're in public. Myth number 16. Breastfeeding is hard work and it takes a lot of energy and time from the mother. Now this is true that breastfeeding takes a lot of time, energy from the mother. However, it is not more hard work than feeding the baby with bottle. Let's reason now. What does it take for you to breastfeed? You don't need to warm the breast milk. It is fresh from the source. You don't need to boil water as opposed to bottle feeding. With bottle feeding, you must ensure that your feeding bottles are properly sterilized in your sterilizing unit. You need at least 8 feeding bottles to ensure that your hygiene is kept in check. You need to warm the milk. You need to measure the milk. All this stress is non-existent with breastfeeding. All you need to do with breastfeeding is just to breastfeed. Myth number 17. Once a baby feeds from a bottle, he or she would not want to go back to breast milk. That is false. Different strokes for different folks. You need to understand that babies are people with personalities. It's a matter of preference. Now, if a child decides to stop breastfeeding, it doesn't necessarily mean that because the child was introduced to bottle feeding, the child now has a preference for bottle feeding as opposed to breastfeeding. You need to realize that there's no relationship between bottle feeding and breastfeeding. Your child being bottle fed would not affect his or her preference for breast milk. So for mothers out there who have noticed that their babies prefer bottle feeding to breast milk, it probably means your baby has preference for bottle feeding by virtue of the baby's nature and preference. Don't forget that the baby is a person with a personality and the right to like or dislike anything you give the baby. It doesn't mean introducing bottle feeding has changed his or her preference for breast milk. Hope you get my point. Myth number 18. Breastfeeding is all or nothing. You can't breastfeed and bottle feed at the same time. Now that is very false. Depending on how available and busy the mother is, she can actually alternate between breastfeeding and bottle feeding, not hindering the other. Myth number 19. Mothers who breastfeed usually don't get enough sleep. That is very wrong. Now, who gets more sleep when all you need to do is just breastfeed? You don't need to boil water. You don't need to measure the amount of milk. You don't need to ensure that the bottles are sterile. Breastfeeding though could be challenging. Research has shown that bottle feeding has no advantage over breastfeeding in terms of the mother's sleep. Myth number 20. You can't take medications while breastfeeding. Now, this is not entirely true. Why? Not all medications find their way into the breast milk. You should see your doctor to confirm if you can breastfeed and yet take your medications. Don't just decide on yourself that because I'm breastfeeding, I can't take any drug. Not all drugs are passed through the breast milk. Myth number 21. If my baby cries while breastfeeding, it probably means I'm not producing enough milk. Now, this is something a lot of mothers assume, that the child is crying because she's not producing enough milk. That is a wrong assumption. There are many reasons why your baby might be crying. Your baby might be crying because you're not giving enough attention, or your baby might be crying because of heat or cold or one thing or the other. Don't just assume that the baby is crying because you're not producing enough milk. I can assure you that your breast milk is tailor-made for your baby. Your baby is getting the exact amount and quality he or she needs for nutrition. Myth number 22. You should not nurse your baby to sleep. Now, that's very wrong. There is no harm in nursing your baby to sleep. In fact, most times when you have breastfed your baby very well, they usually sleep while breastfeeding. So your baby sleeping while or after breastfeeding is not out of place. Myth number 23. It will be difficult for you to breastfeed, especially because you have small breasts. Now, let me assure you, the size of your breast has nothing to do with the amount of milk produced. I have seen a lot of people with small breasts yet produce a gallon of milk. And I've seen a lot of mothers with very large breasts and produce little amount of milk. So keep this at the back of your mind, that the size of the breast have nothing to do with the quantity of milk produced. Myth number 24. Formula is as good as breast milk. Now, let me state this clearly. You can try to compare any infant formula with breast milk, but breast milk still contains the exact amount of vitamins, antibodies, all the baby needs, the exact quantity, the exact proportion the baby needs. It is cheaper, it is far better, it is readily available, does not require being warmed, does not require being sterilized, does not require being measured, as opposed to infant formula. If you just love this video, I would have you like, post a comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. So we'll meet again, same place, same time next week. Don't forget, health is wealth. Bye now.